Our gracious Heavenly Father, we're so humble and grateful that we could come before you this day. We're thankful for the opportunity we have to serve on council, and bless us this day as the agenda is full with the needs of the town of Cardston, that we may be able to do our best to keep those residents in mind in all of our decisions. We'd ask a special blessing on those that are struggling due to COVID and being out of work and the other stresses that are going on in their lives. Bless them that they may feel thy love. Help us that we may strive to make good choices. We're grateful for all we have, and we say these things humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. So today is a regular town council meeting, this 14th day of July. And for me, it's a very memorable day. It's Bastille Day.
Oh, yeah.
And
Burn anything today. Cut their heads off.
so we go in to call this meeting to order. We have our Sergeant Wright in attendance. Thank you. And we have our media, Corey McCarthy. Do we have the Temple City Star? No, cannot see. Thank you so much for being there. So we have an agenda there that needs to be adopted. Councillor Brown?
Make a motion to adopt the agenda for today, the 14th day of July, 2020.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. All right, so Sergeant Wright, if you like to come to the pulpit, thank you so much. We welcome you in our town of Cardston, and happy to have you on council reporting for us.
Great, well, thank you.
So much.
It's nice to meet everybody. Slowly making my way around town, trying to meet everybody. With COVID, that's been a bit difficult to run around shaking hands, but I'm endeavoring to do so. So just, I guess, maybe just a quick introduction, I guess, for those that I haven't met. My name's Robert Wright. I go by Bob, if you see me out and around. Cardston's going to be my fifth post. Previous to this, I was serving in the Elk Valley. I was serving Elkford, Sparwood, Fernie, kind of from Kananaskis down to the Rooseville border crossing. I was a supervisor over there. I dealt with critical incidents all through the East Kootenays, from anywhere from, I guess, the BC-Alberta border all the way over to Kelowna. So I spent about 5 years doing that. Previous to that, I was over in Lake Louise. I keep telling staffing that was my northern posting. I'm not sure if they're going to bite on that one or not, but we'll see. But I started my career down in Bikini and then over in Pitcher Creek, and spent a number of years policing down there as well. Like Ryan, I do a lot of instructing, travel around doing a lot of stuff with public and police officer safety, articulation, use of force, crisis intervention, de-escalation techniques, and things of that nature. So previous to this job, I was in the Canadian Armed Forces. Served with the PPCLI to Edmonton, served over in Afghanistan, and a bunch of other stuff my wife wasn't impressed with. So yeah, that's a whole other issue. So yeah, we're all kind of moved into the area. We're in McGrath for the moment, but we'll see what happens with the housing market and make a transition hereafter. I guess during my tenure here, which I expect to be several years, you're probably not going to see a whole lot of change in our basic core mandates. Essentially, keeping crime rates low, clearance rates high. You're going to see us again invested in the community policing model, both in Cardston and surrounding areas. You'll start to see a lot of focus on rural crime, traffic enforcement, and prolific offender management, especially in our downtown core here. So I guess as I get to know you and I come to more council meetings, I'll update and report on those as we go and progress. And with that, I'm not sure exactly what stats and facts town council gets here and in what format. I'm not sure. Did you guys receive this one?
Yes, that's what we received.
This one here? Okay. And is council, are we happy with this format? Is this working? Is it easily enough understood? Too much, too little?
I think it works for us.
Okay.
What we try to understand is sometimes are there trends that we should be aware of?
Right.
And maybe we know that it's not always easy to rely on what the trends say, but maybe you can help
But
us
coming in
with the
right now, if
understanding.
you look at the trends overall, like provincially, our crime rates are down, right? Both in
Right.
urban and rural centers, right? So that's a good thing. A lot of the strategies we're using for crime reduction are working. They are being implemented both in urban and rural settings. And we're doing stuff, especially this year to enhance the things in the rural area, like rural crime watch type programs. We're getting more involved with those to bring down numbers. Again, we sat, a couple of us, I think, were in that meeting there last week, talking about our crime reduction units here for Southern Alberta and what they're doing to assist us, I guess, as a region and locally, right, when we need to bring them in to target prolific offenders and stuff like that. So, overall crime rates are down. Specifically to the area, I would caution you not to look too much from quarter to quarter to see trends. Like looking at crime trends, we kind of play those out more by years as opposed to months. One teenager having a bad day with a pocket full of rocks can do a lot of damage and really bump up our stats locally, right? So we tend not to put too much weight on those. But certainly when we do see trends like crimes against persons, assaults and things like that nature, especially over a year or two, and we're seeing like a steady increase, we really start to pay attention to those and start to look at the root causes and what partner agencies we can engage to bring those rates back down. So, and more importantly, we like to see, and I don't think you guys will have it on there, but the stats are one thing. The clearance rates are something entirely else, and those clearance rates are essentially what. The number of those files that come in, how are we resolving them? Are we resolving them with charges? Are complainants declining to lay information or press charges? They want to skirt the court system in some way, right? So we want to see that clearance rate high, where our clients are satisfied with the service they're receiving, right? Whether that's, we've charged this guy and he's going to court, or, they want alternative measures, or they're just happy that, this guy's got a verbal tongue lashing, so to speak, and he's on his way. So, yeah.
There is one issue that concerns council and has concerned council for quite a while, is the use of non-potable substance on a street.
Non-what, sorry?
Non-potable substance, so you don't drink that.
Oh, hairspray, mouthwash, that kind of stuff? Blacker, sure. Okay.
And so we have a bylaw in town that were put in place, and I'm wondering, how difficult is it to enforce those bylaws?
Very difficult. Bylaws are always very difficult to enforce, right across the board. It's not unique to this town. It's every place I've ever been, right? Bylaws are tricky because we sit here in a room, we think, hey, we've got a great idea. Like, this is the end-all be-all. Let's put this in place. The police can enforce it, which is great. We can enforce it. But then we got to get a Crown prosecutor to bite on the idea of actually pursuing the stuff through the court system. And a lot of times what happens is we fail to engage the Crown Council or the prosecution system in the creation of these bylaws to make sure they're workable in a court system, right?
Okay, so to engage the prosecutor. Interesting.
So thinking back, right? Experience always being, in hindsight, being a bit 20/20. Really, that's kind of the first stop. Hey, we've got this great idea, to combat or solve a problem. Does this work in the court system? Everything we have here locally says, yeah, we can create bylaws. A lot of them are great ideas, but then we get them into a court of law, right? And some of them aren't worth the paper they're written on. Right, so we really got to engage that prosecution system there and make sure that what we're putting forward to them is something that they can enforce and run through the court systm successfully.
Thank you. Yeah. Interesting tip.
Sergeant, what about repeat offenders? Are you still banging your head against the wall? Is the judicial system backing you up?
It's an ongoing battle, and especially right now, we know the court systems were flooded to begin with, and now they're dealing with a huge backlog of cases, right? Just because court's been out of session for months here. So right now, the things that are being prosecuted in court are kind of, our high tier level type crimes. We're seeing a lot of them that are withdrawn. But regardless of what I guess the courts are doing, our priority as far as prolific offender management, right, is kind of getting in these people's faces on a day-to-day basis and kind of, you don't want to use the term adult babysitting, but man, we got to be there, right? We got to be engaging these people on a daily basis and at least letting them know we're there, regardless if it's how or if it's being prosecuted in the court systems. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there further questions, Councillor Court?
I'm just looking real quickly at the numbers here. Roughly about 1,200 people, some repeat offenders, obviously have had some kind of engagement with the RCMP in the last 6 months. Does that seem to be a little high for a town of about 4,000? And again, I don't know how many of those are coming into town and causing the problems, or how many are actually residents of the town.
Typically, and I think we ran through these numbers here maybe last week, right? You'll often see 10% of your population causing 50 to 60% of your call volume, right? So it's not uncommon at all.
What we're seeing here then.
At one point, we saw in Pincher Creek there, I think we were running, it was close to 2,000 prisoners a year, and it was about 20 people. Right, they were just running through it. We had one guy getting his mail at a detachment at one point, right? It was ridiculous, right? So you can certainly see trends like that, right? We're not taking mail for anybody. We're just
All right.
no. So hopefully, I know I'm not trying to skirt that, but just you will see trends like that, right?
It seems like 1,200 is very high for a small town.
It is. But you get 4 guys move out of town all of a sudden, right? You could see that number drop down to 300, right? It's just. Again, 10% doing 50 to 60% of the crime.
But what is reassuring is that the police is there. Obviously, the number reflect the work that you do on the street for the
it's
town.
1,200 calls we take. It's 1,200 people that are perhaps being taken off the street, lodged in cells, or gone through the court system, right?
Right.
So
thank
a large
you.
number of repeat offenders then, okay.
Absolutely. Prolific offender management is always one of our priorities, always something we're trying to engage, right? Just because, those numbers have been around for years, right? And we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We know there's, a productive and positive way to deal with and manage these people, right? And we're just going to keep going through those motions, right? And what that looks like, I guess, tangibly is, for instance, we have people that are on curfew right now, right? They're doing bad things in other communities, and all of a sudden they're on curfew here. So, we're checking them 2-3 times a day, right? Making sure they're abiding by the conditions set out by the courts, making sure they're abiding by the curfew, and they're not out running amok in our town. So,
Thank you so much. Councillor Brown?
I just have a question. You brought up the clearance rate. What is do we have a good clearance rate?
Yeah, some of them are fantastic, but again, it's a stat, right? I can give you a stat to combat a stat, but I like all the clearance rates I've seen. When you get a large volume of files, say you got 1,000 thefts, I think we like to see a clearance rate of north of 30%, right? That we're solving, and that's considered that's about an average, right? But we've got clearance rates, in the 90s. We got some of our stats that are 100% clearance rates. But mind you, it's all based on the number of occurrences. So if I get 4 impaired driving calls or complaints over the week, and I find all 4 impaired drivers and charge them, I got 100% clearance rate. So, get one.
But
Sorry?
overall,
Overall, our clearance rates are higher than average, way higher than average. Yeah.
Awesome.
So we're doing good here right now.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Sergeant Wright, and thank you to your detachment, and keep on the good work.
Sure.
Thank you so much, and welcome.
Thank you very much.
Bye. All right. So we now have Mr. Gordon Atkins, who would like to talk about something that is of interest to Councillor Court. So, Mr. Atkins, if you'd like to come to the podium, and I'm going to let Councillor Court kind of give us a little bit of a preamble. You brought that item to the
trail
table.
system you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, I've run into Mr. Atkins, not literally, of course, a few times on the trail system, and had a good conversation with him. I do use it quite a bit. I guess some of the concerns are that I brought up here the last council was the some reason people are bringing horses onto that trail now, and I think we need to restrict that. I understand you have a little bit of an issue with bicycles. You don't like them on the trail either. Well, that hurts my feelings, but but really, I would like to see that trail system expanded as well. But that's a whole other story. But anyhow, that's. Yeah.
So it's all yours.
Thank you, and good evening to all of you. To begin with, I'll remind you that I have a hearing problem with both hearing aids up to full volume. So if you'd speak up, I'd appreciate it when you do speak. If I understand correctly, the invitation from Jeff, it was simply to have a discussion about those who would be legitimate users of the path system. I don't think there's any question in terms of body count that the path has been successful and is currently very successful, partly because of the virus. Obviously, the paved road and the park-like conditions that the subdivision and the golf course have attract a lot of people in there at any time. What I would like to remind you of is that in the initial stages of the pathway, this was done as a joint agreement between myself and the town, and then the Rotary Club piggybacked on. The town has made a donation of about $30,000 for the pathway. I've made a $30,000 plus contribution, and the Rotary Club put in $12,000 to $15,000. The pathway is designed simply as, again, to be very frank, as a pedestrian pathway. It's only 70 inches wide, and with the natural growth along the sides, you're reasonably restricted to that width as well. I don't know, but I don't think that there's any discussion or thoughts about motorized vehicles, quads or motorcycles or any of those things. So I'm assuming that we're only discussing bicycles, bodies, and horses. And again, from my perspective, horses are simply not acceptable on the pathway. There is some use of horses on the pathway. I think that I'll need to talk to Glenn about that, but some of the horses coming in through there. But quite often, obviously, again, there's droppings left behind. They chew up the track and so on. Bicycles, it's an interesting situation here in Cardston. I know it's exacerbated by the virus, but we've got a lot of young fellows with bicycles and a couple of older fellows with bicycles too. And the reality is that without construction and the road to the subdivision itself, which is a private road and is labeled as a private road, those who come in by the road are put on notice that they enter at their own risk. Obviously, we have a different situation with the pathway. I don't know how familiar you are with the game that we've been playing with the Alberta Transportation, but you may be aware that, in fact, there was no license or consent ever from Alberta Transportation for you to walk under the bridge. I wasn't aware of that, and we got going further into furnishings for the pathway, and then we ended up in discussion with I'm going to get into trouble here now, the sensitivity of the engineers that were involved. It always, and I suppose it even reflects on your council as well, both risk management as well as maintenance are two items that are high on the agenda always. Alberta Transportation, their only concern are those two things. And I was only being facetious, but I asked the engineers what was their purpose of life. And not much came out of that, but I said, as an architect, one of the things that I've always thought that the purpose of life was simply the lifestyle that we each are able to create for ourselves. And that sensitivity almost always requires us to give up things in favor of other things. And so in this particular case, not only did they refuse one of the things that I had done in terms of furnishing the pathway, and by the way, I'm doing that on my own. The furnishings are not overly expensive. We'll get into that in a moment. But the furnishings, first of all, I wanted to have a control point at the bridge. And that gate is something that's still coming up as part of the approval by Alberta Transportation. And that will be signed and have restrictions on it. That was number one. Number two, at one point or another, and I think this came mostly from Rotary, they wanted recognition for the support of the pathway so that the town and Creek Works and Rotary would get some credit for the work that was done there. But once you go through what we'll refer to as the gate, which is under the bridge, it seemed to me that two or three things are in play. First of all, you may know that the bridge leaks. Secondly, the underside of the bridge, because it was not permitted for you to walk under there in the first place, nothing was done. So it's just raw clay as a back slope. And that raw clay leads up to the underside of the bridge, which leads up to the graffiti that's constantly there. My idea was, after we went through the gate, to then have some benches there that people could gather, and or during a rainstorm or something else, they'd be protected. Again, the Alberta Transportation, absolutely no way. We don't want you anywhere close. We don't want anything that you do anywhere close. We'll consider, and they finally did consider, and I think we now have permit to walk under the bridge. But there were certain things done by the town of Cardston, again, to, I guess, improve that underside. And I won't get into the criticisms that I have of heavy equipment operators completing the aesthetics of the underside of the bridge, because I'm very critical that way. So I'll just leave that alone and have that discussion with Bart and Jeff. But the reality is that some work has been done under there, and once we get that finished. But what I wanted to do quickly as well, I hope that I can just convince you that bicycles in a pathway system, it seems to me, cause a certain amount of safety and other risks. Most cyclists, other than our councillor here, are young people looking for fun, and or alternately mountain bikers who are looking for speed or for opportunities. And the problem here, obviously, is that many of the people using the pathway are either mothers and children or older people, all of who present a problem in terms of hearing a bicycle approaching from the back. So there's a real danger that's involved there. Young people are not very aware of what they're posing, and it can surprise an older person, and they jump to the side and end up in an unfortunate situation. So again, from my perspective, the pathway was designed as a pedestrian pathway. I'd like to see it remain a pedestrian pathway, and that all others would be excluded from there. I did want to quickly show you some of the furnishings and also a further thought with respect to the pathway system. I opened by telling you that the pathway is well used, and it really is. The nice thing about it is that the pathway shares both easement properties on the properties and also the ER, which is controlled by the town and the Crown. So that portion close to the creek itself. But as you wander through there are a lot of opportunities to have surprises, to see and not see, and go around a corner and be into an area. And again, once we have people living there, there will be more surveillance and a little bit more control from that perspective. Having said all of that, in planning some of these communities in the past, everyone loves a pathway, except the person whose property it's close to. And Again, you can see the rationale. They think their privacy is being interrupted, or that people that are there that they don't have any control over. So again, let me just quickly run through what I've got here. I've just got some photos. I show you this one because, again, I'm running into, and I may not be speaking to the right people, but I'm running into, I guess, a lack of enthusiasm for a drinking fountain and also for additional garbage bins along the pathway. Seems to me that the pathway is only about 1,000 meters long, but people walking through there and coming all the way from the Lions Park and through past the Remington Center, I don't know how many garbage bins are along there, but the temptation to just drop their wrappings from food and other things. So I'd like to put in the garbage bins, but as I said, I'm not receiving an enthusiastic response there. If you decide not to have garbage bins, then I will locate them in any case on the easements of the property that I'm selling, and then I will actually end up being the garbage man that picks them up. I'll have somebody look after that. I'm only suggesting maybe three bins in different locations. This fountain, on the other hand, again, I understand perhaps the reluctance of the town to get into the business of providing water for pedestrians. Having said that, I wanted a simple, single watering station, and in pricing this, surprising enough, it's about $3,500 US for a single fountain. And so, being the cheapskate that I am, I went after the China option, and the China option gave me the very same drinking fountain, but I ended up with 10 of them. So one other thing I wanted to propose to the council is that I would like to keep 2 or 3 so that if we do have vandalism and on the one that I put in the pathway system that I've got replacements, but I would be quite willing to donate the other 7 to the town so that the town could either use them alongside the schools, the playgrounds, the sporting fields, that sort of thing, or even on the main street if there were 2 or 3 locations that you'd think would be appropriate. Next slide, Jim. Oh, okay. This is just the entry under the bridge, and so I've just shown a single garbage bin. There's a table here, and I've just put all these things in temporarily just to show you what the possibilities are with what I've purchased. This particular table, as you can see, actually works as a table that you sit to, but the table surface has a lever on it, and you can turn it into a backrest. So all 3 of the ones that I have like this operate both as a table and a sitting area. So this one would just be a gathering point where people would come and first meet and go onto the pathway. The 3 other objects that you see there are simply IKEA planters upside down that I will be filling with concrete, and then with all of these pieces of furniture. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the term duck-bill anchor, but basically it's just on a cable. It's just a device that you pound into the ground, then you pull it back and the duck-bill opens up so it resists. So the 2 pieces of furniture we put in there over the winter, somebody's tried to lift them and they haven't been successful. One of them had a piece and they took the piece away, but we know that no matter what we do, there will be efforts in that regard. Keep going, Jeff. Again, this is just the same thing from a different angle and looking back again. But I thought that the first one would, now you can see the width of the path there, the width of the path there is only 70 inches. And the growth along the pathway was so high last year that I had a couple of ladies complain that they were actually having trouble walking the pathway because it was overlapping. So I ended up with a device that I can go along and cut the edges of those, and then we gather that up. But anyway, it just gives you an idea where you've got a pathway, you've got a vision, and then all of a sudden you're into the trees, and then in behind the trees. And so even people walking will sometimes be surprised by somebody coming out of that situation. So again, horses or bicycles could create a real problem, I think, Karen. Again, I'm just showing you 2 or 3 other locations where these, I'll call them stools, could be. I naturally, as an architect, designed a couple of these, precast concrete, and then got the $800 bill back for each one of them, and decided I'd use the $30 IKEA planters and put some concrete in them. Okay. This one used to have a center section there, but somebody's lifted it out and taken it away. Okay. Just more the same. And this is the one that I tried to lift out, and it's been there over the winter. As I said, these pieces of furniture are not overly expensive. If they disappear or suffer, it's not difficult to replace. You may or may not know that even the garbage bins that you have in town itself, if you buy those individually, you're going to pay, without any of your discounts, you're going to pay about $800 a piece for those garbage bins. This is all Wayfair stuff, and the garbage bins are like $120 or something, and I think about $400 or $500 for the bench and that kind of thing. So a few $1,000s is all. Carry on. Again, the views that you pick up with some of the locations along the pathway. Again, this is the one location where the pathway, the water, and the road kiss each other. And I want to emphasize this for a moment because as we get in a little further, this is a location where I guess I need to back up here and say, I've told many of you this already. I'm here to do the subdivision as a legacy for the town, not for Gordon Atkins, but a legacy for the town. For those people that decide to opt and buy in here with the trees that are oversized lots, the water, the golf course, and whatever other hazards that are there, it's an exceptional opportunity for a half to 3/4 of an acre parcel. They're averaging about $150,000 a piece. If I were selling those in Calgary, they'd go at exactly $1 million a piece. And so I'm hoping that we'll attract some people who get tired of golfing and want to spend some of their time, expertise, and money bringing additional services to town. But this location, and my other reason for trying to defend the pedestrian-only situation is that I realize that these other uses, I've been facetious about this before, but quite a few people that I know in Cardston, I'm pretty sure that they would work 1 day a week to get enough gas to sit on the quad the rest of the week. And so quads and some of those other sporting things are things that are necessary, and people are going to find opportunities to use their. This is not the place for it. Right here, just before you get here, is where I wanted to put the drinking fountain. And then just past those seating areas is a location where I would like to, as I receive income from the cellulose subdivision, it's my intent to use all of the funds that I get from the subdivision to bring additional services to the town. And at this location, I would like to apply for and work on a pedestrian suspension bridge. It would allow, from this point on, a different form of pathway system so we don't go into the Rundlestone, the more expense and that sort of thing, but to carry on, and I'll show you on a site plan what I have in mind and hope that at one point or another you'll be able to give support to that. But, again, this is just the same location, another location, and then the view here. There's one other location that I haven't showed you, and I didn't haul all the stuff there because all of it has to be properly settled. But just beyond this point is where you turn, and because there's no loop on the pathway, there are problems created because people go to the end of the pathway and then they think they have the right to carry on the road and go through the golf course. And that's a no-no. And so we'll try to signage that. But in addition, some of them go to the end and then just walk back up the road. But right at the end of this pathway, If you go a little bit further, is where there's a swimming hole, and there's a sandy beach, and it's right across from some of the mitigation that the town has done, and a lot of people go to that particular point. I was going to put 2 or 3 pieces of furniture there so people could have a little picnic or that sort of thing as well. But if we have the pedestrian bridge, carry on, Jeff, I think. Okay. Now this one, I don't know if you got a. Okay. Bottom button. Let me just, again, where are we here? Am I blind as well as?
I don't see it either. I can see here. Left hand.
There.
It's going, just that very, very last.
Okay, I'll try it again.
There, oh. I'm down.
If you'll excuse me for a minute, I'll just come into the little thing here for a second, if you don't mind. Basically, you see the big U shape is obviously the subdivision, the golf course is beyond that. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And right at that point where your light is, if you go across to the right, you'll see there's a ditch there where the water flows all the way from there over to that road. That road is an access road up to the potato patch. But if you go right to that other road, then you'll see that there's a ravine that follows around, and it goes all the way onto Roger Lewis's property, and then it turns back onto my property again, and you can see the deep ravine that goes all the way down to the bottom, which is where
Jackson's?
tell me.
Crest Springs?
No, there's Crest Springs is there too. That's when I bought the property, but this Roland Jackson.
Roland Jackson.
Okay. Now, if you look at the land that is being cropped there, that's the end of my property, and then it goes up through the other U of the creek. Show the next one, Jeff, please.
Okay.
Now you'll see if it goes all the way over, Cole Levitt
Right.
owns the other property there that used to belong to
Blackmore.
Lord Lovelow. As you probably know, just at the curve of the road at the bottom, he is now in the process of getting approval for some additional campsites. On the hillside where you see the road and it splits and goes down the hill, about where it splits is where he's also getting permission to build his own house and have another couple of sites there. I don't want to stop him from doing that. I'm not offended by it. I'm just concerned if you go over to the corner of the crop field there and at the top of the hill, up further, Jeff, over on the other side, right?
Here?
Yep, a little bit higher now, right up there. That's an escarpment. If you come up on that little road and stop at that escarpment and look west, you can look all the way to the town dam and the ravine, the sandstone, the bottom. It's just majestic. And you might as well be 1,000 miles away from civilization in Cardston and everybody else. You can't see anything except the mountains. Having said all of that, from that point now, there will be some sighting of, not the trailers, but the house. When it goes in, it'll ruin that view. I'm talking as an architect now, it'll ruin that view. But in any case, all of those things used together, I would like to then have the pathway come down across the bottom. I've talked to Cole and he's all in favor. He wants a mountain bike path and has been using my land to do that. But so we would carry that on and go back through his property, so there could be a loop all the way around back to the farm. And that way we'd have a 2 or 3 mile pathway system and could have more versatility and sections that were accessed individually and still both horses, bikes, and other modes of pedestrian traffic. So that's part of the goal that I would like to see in the future. So, again, I'm well past my time in giving you all of my.
Hold on, can I ask you if it's going to be used by horses and by bikes and by pedestrian, how wide do you envision that path to be?
I would say if you look at the pathway that you now have from the Remington Center to the bridge,
Right.
you've got an 8 to 10 foot pathway. And the difference here is difference in just the width of the path there. As you can see from the pathway around the subdivision, it's the mature trees, bushes, and topographical changes that provide both excitement, surprise, and danger. Whereas the one going back to the Lions Park is open and you can see, for 200 or 300 yards whether somebody's coming or not. And so that's more of the issue. But typically, even in Calgary, where they've now blended the two, and then they've required cyclists to have a bell ringer, so that every time they see a pedestrian, bing, 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 and so on. But there's still problems and accidents. But I would say that a minimum would be probably 8 feet, and it may be 10 feet if you're going to combine pedestrians with any other kind of traffic.
Thanks.
And again, the one beneficial thing in Cardston, obviously, is that we don't have the traffic. We don't have hundreds of bodies at any given point. But sometimes you'll have 8 or 10 or 15 people in a gathering. But in Calgary, we're talking about 1,000 people in a 300-meter stretch, and so it's a different game. And the other thing that happens, obviously, is the more people you have, there's actually a traffic calming requirement, because people who are on some kind of a vehicle are more alert and more aware that they're going to get themselves into trouble if they don't pay attention. But in a case like this, the kids love to go into the subdivision, for example, and that first ramp that goes down the hill for skateboards and bicycles and that sort of thing. So, and again, no problem with them using it, but there's always that risk. And in this case, because it's a private road, there's no reason the private road is a risk on me or on the subdivision.
Yeah. Thank you.
Guilty as charged.
Do you have more pictures still?
No.
Oh.
All right, so other question for Mr. Atkins? Councillor Barnes?
If you had any concern with people just driving through there, taking a look at the property, and if so, are they going too fast, or, I know, I go down about once a month just to kind of check and see if there's any nuisance going on. I'm looking at it from a realtor's perspective.
You've opened one question, and I'll throw it to council again. A year or so ago, Jeff, I asked council, and you did decide to do it, to ask the province to reduce on 9th Avenue the speed from 70 to 50.
50, yeah.
I don't know what's happened there. It still reads at 70, but I can tell you right now it's 110. And going from the top rail on both ends of that past the trailer park, where there are children, dogs, and balls on the 9th, it's scared me half to death. But your question is still, it concerns me, people going up and down there at the speed that they do, but generally, because of the meander in the road, and we have the same meander in the pathway, it slows people down. And it's posted at 30 kilometers an hour. And because there's no parking, no curb gutters, no sidewalks, and often pedestrians, again, it's
Yeah.
So, generally speaking, people go in there and there's no problem. And
That's good.
So as I said, it's more simply a matter of them being aware that they're entering at their own risk.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Bengry?
Gordon, what bothers me is the wife and I have drove down your private road, and about every time we go down there, there's always garbage along the side, whether chocolate bar wrappers or whatever. And so if you expand this trail, make it wider, you're going to get more garbage. Whether it's horses or people, there's always garbage. And the thing bad about horses, they fertilize a lot. And you don't need that kind of fertilizer on a walking trail. You know.
One other interesting, one of my favorite spots is Carmel, California. And There are more dogs in Carmel, California than there are anywhere else on the planet. Cardston doesn't have that particular problem. But I was trying to incorporate one of the things that I saw there, which is the doggy bag for picking up the droppings and so on. Again, it's not a big problem because we've got a lot of natural foliage and so on, and not that many dogs here. But back to your particular question, and that is the garbage. It seems to me that at least you put the responsibility on people when they've got the option to put it in a garbage bin. Mm-hmm. And there's only 2 or 3 locations in the subdivision where it would be easy for your garbage collector to pick it up. It's just 3 or 4 more stops, but you've already got, which are plenty. And the 2 guys that I have working for me over the summer, my counsel to them was that you don't do anything for me. There's only one thing that you do for me. And the only thing you do for me is make everything that you see look better. That's all. That's your only job. And that means that if you see a piece of paper, pick it out. And you know, a lot of people walking in there too. I've seen some. Shaw, for one, goes along, picks those things up, and redeposits them. So I think we should give them the opportunity at least to do the right thing and have 2 or 3.
See, going along with that, Gordon, if you go down to Lions Park, there's one garbage can where an old park building used to be that is always full. And I've always been coming in to ask Jeff if we couldn't put a bigger container in there, because it flows over, the birds get into it and everything else, you know. And it's in an ideal place. They just pull in, throw their garbage at the garbage can, and some of them place it in it, but it's always full. So like you said, if you put a garbage can along that walking trail, somebody's going to have to be emptying it all the time.
And if you put it there, it's going to be used and it's going to be misused.
Exactly.
So, as I said, if the town opts to opt out, then, as I said, during the summers, for sure, I will make sure that my people make the stops, because I won't tolerate stuff all over the place.
I'm going to say this, it's going to age me. I used to camp all along that creek. Horseshoe Bend, Crest Springs is one of the most favorite places that you can go.
Me too.
and Horseshoe Bend is a beautiful area, and I hate to see those kind of places destroyed.
Thank you so much. Any more questions? Thank you so much, Gordon, for that presentation, and you gave us many ideas and things to talk about later on. So thank you for your advice, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, and if there's anything I can do to help in any of the decisions that you make or the non-decisions that you make, I'm available.
Thank you.
Okay.
I see you as passionate as ever. All right, we will now carry on the business of council. At 7 p.m. or so, we will have another delegation, but it will be in closed session due to the nature of the item. So we have minutes of council of June 23rd, 2020, and July 7th, 2020. So we need to adopt them separately. So, Councillor Selk?
Move adoption of the June 23rd, 2020 regular meeting of council.
Thank you. Any comment regarding those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. Councillor Barnes?
I move to adopt the minutes of the special meeting held on July 7th, 2020.
Thank you. Comments? All in favor? Thank you. Those are adopted. So let's go to item 6, bylaw and policy. Nature trail restriction. So Councillor Colt, maybe if you want to go ahead and you wanted this item on the agenda.
Yes, obviously I can see his concerns with the bicycles. I also think as a town, I went for a nice long drive in McGrath. They got a beautiful trail system there down by their golf course. Rayma just paved theirs from one end to the other. we've got a tremendous number of users on here, so somehow we need to work out some kind of a way that we can blend, is that the word, both cyclists and a nice pedestrian trail. Now, he mentioned some going across a pedestrian bridge. I'm not quite sure how McGrath managed to pull off a bridge underneath their road and spent $600,000 to build a tunnel, sorry, not a bridge.
I'll talk to the people in McGrath. They'll tell you what they think of it.
I went and saw it, and I'm not quite sure the purpose of it. But apparently they must have got permission to do that from Alberta, whatever, and they can walk underneath that highway. So I don't see the issue with this one, just if McGrath's allowed. I would just really would like to see a more expanded trail system. I was in Banff on the weekend. That town is built for pedestrians and bicycles. There's a legacy trail all the way from Canmore to Banff that's 9 meters wide, which is a good width, and that very easily allows for pedestrians and for bicyclists. It is heavily used. Again, I'm not a young rider, so I don't see the issues he was dealing with the dirt bike guys. I ride it, and I see people, and I slow right down. But I'm old, so I don't know how the younger people are riding that. But I would certainly hate to see it taken away from bicyclists as well, because where else are they going to ride on the streets or along the bypass, which is very dangerous. So.
Okay, so he was mentioning the importance of cyclists signaling their presence.
Yes.
And I think I've seen that in Vancouver too on a
I've got a bell on my bike,
big pathway around Stanley Park, and you have to signal. But those paths are definitely much wider than 70-inch. 70-inch is not very wide. And I can understand that sooner or later there is liability that is to be incurred. And if it's our path or if it's his path, how do we deal with that? I don't know. That's a question I'm throwing out.
Speaking for myself, I have not had problems getting by people, but I let them know a long ways ahead that I'm there, and I have to get off my bike and move it to the side.
But you're not a daredevil either, I would imagine.
Used to be when I got old.
Okay, so you're speaking for the daredevils. Councillor Selk.
I guess a comment and then a suggestion. The Rec Committee has already made a recommendation to Council to enhance our trail system in town.
Make them bigger.
My recommendation would be, since we are looking at a planning session, let's make this a topic of conversation at our planning session and move on.
I think that will be a great point, but I also think what we need a little bit of preliminary work to understand what's at stake here. You have the need to increase the length of the path, and I think that would be a great thing. But there is also a way to mitigate multiple use and try to understand how we can do it safely. And I think there is no reason for saying, no, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. We need to explore all alternatives, but we also need to understand how do we make it safe for all and respectable for all. Because if you have horse dropping in the middle of a path that is so narrow, I don't know.
I don't think horses should be allowed on there, period. That's my feeling. I just don't think they should be there. It's a walking path or a bike path. I don't have a problem with bikes on there, but I don't like horses on there myself.
Councillor Brown?
So I'm all over the idea of Parks and Rec and bringing it up at our planning meeting. But I think one important thing that we need to do, and this really has come up in the this last week, is I use that trail system weekly, love it, use it often. But something that I'm seeing is off-leash dogs within that area. And so, and we had somebody gotten bit a few days ago.
Yeah.
And it's happened to myself as well. And so I feel like signage, you brought up the word signage, I think that is huge. Years ago, we didn't have to say, you can't have your horse, you can't have your bike, you can't people just had the common sense and they just didn't do it.
Exactly.
But somehow along the way, we have to have signs for everything now, which is unfortunate, but it is the reality. So whether I feel like on our existing pathways and looking to the future, that they need to say, you have to have your dog on leash within this area. You have to pick up for the love after your animals or whatever, no horses, whatever we approve to happen on those trails, we need to make sure that the signage is often and throughout it. As far as garbage goes, when Councillor Bengry brought that up, with any sort of development, there's garbage. I mean, everywhere. I could have 1,400. I mean, it's like a teenager with laundry. The laundry basket is right there, yet the laundry will be right next to it, right? You can't cure a lot of things.
You know much about it.
I really do. But I'm just saying, I think signage is really important when we're looking at this. And I myself have talked to Dr. Levitt in regards to doing some sort of collaboration, like, is it possible that we could join up, through his land, just questioning him, and he was all over it. He's a huge supporter of
Good trails.
Something, and it wasn't nailing anything down, but he's very reasonable in saying this is something he would consider.
So, listening to Mr. Atkins, it seemed to be there was two kind of ideas that were presented. One is keep the path that is existing for pedestrian. That was one idea. The other one was the extension that should be for multiple use, horse, pedestrian, and bikers. And so there would be a potential to have two types of trail with different usage, but both would satisfy pedestrian as the number one. Okay, Councillor Cole.
Was he offering the ravine area and parts of his land for that?
What he was offering is an idea and a partnership. That's what he was kind of offering, if I understood him correctly. Jeff, did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, Mr. Atkins is talking about this for years, about offering up easements through his land to get into that ravine area. He's always been favorable.
Yeah, I think that's something he had envisioned, and now he's talking of a tripartite kind of agreement with Dr. Levitt, his property, and the town. So that's what I kind of understood, and that would have that option of multiple use, and would be built 8 to 10 feet, he say no less than 8 feet wide, to accommodate those different uses. So, Councillor Drew and Councillor Brown.
I know that there's some potential for some accidents to happen on these trails, but do we have any data that suggests that people are running into each other, or that there's...
Well, what we only know about dog bites.
And that's the only...
Which is not pleasant. That's not what a trail is meant to do.
I was just
Councillor
going to
Brown?
add to it what Councillor Barnes said, and that is, I too agree that this isn't an area for your horses. I'm a farm girl myself, and I never took my horse on a paved path. You just don't do that. You got fields. There's so much. There's such a huge area to take your horses on. This isn't one of them. I feel like we take that right out of the equation. I think it should be bikes, and it should be families, and it should be dogs on leashed. I think is fine.
Okay, if you remember, amen. But if you remember, we have a bylaw in town that does not eliminate the use of force on a road, and it does not ask them to have a bag behind them either. So if you remember, that was what the council of the day asked to be.
I don't think we have a problem with the horses in the burrow pits, horses on the roads, that's fine. But this is a nature trail for pedestrians. Now, pedestrians can be bikes or walking. I have no problem with those. But for love, as you say, horses shouldn't be there.
Well,
I don't think they should be there, period.
some obviously differ.
And I think we can make that designation.
Okay.
That's what
So,
we're here to do.
are you intending to do that, to take a position now?
Yeah.
No, then put a motion forward.
Mayor, Councillor Selk suggested that we look at this at our planning session.
I have no
And-
problem with
and-
that, waiting for that either.
Yeah, and myself, as I'd prefer to get more information from the rec committee, from the golf committee, and let's have a clear view of what we
Fine
want to
with
do.
that.
Okay, so we shall defer all that conversation to the planning session in September.
Yep.
Are we okay with that?
Yep. I'm
Thank-
fine with that.
Thank you, all right, that's good. But increasing the paths, I'm all for that idea. Planning for the future would be a nice thing to do. 6B, draft bylaw 1693, garbage and recycling bylaw. As you could see last time when we looked at this bylaw, some changes were required. Now, the changes are in your packet or on your screen in yellow. So I read them and I really think there are definitions that are there to help us understand what's in the text itself, which is good. I'm not sure that everybody can feel it's as clear as mud sometimes.
I just have one problem, and I'm kind of looking at it from Darcy's point of view as well. 5B, Part 2, 5B, an unattached, easily removable, non-locking, and properly functioning watertight lid. I just see that as nothing but a nightmare if you're going to require a lid on your garbage, because he's going to take it off and it's going to blow down the block, or it's going to blow down the block, or the lids have a way of disappearing. I don't know if we can make it a requirement to have a lid on that garbage before he picks it up. Is that the intent?
Well, the intent is for it not to be so heavy
I
as some
understand that, but
are.
to put a lid on top of garbage,
And
he has
some-
to take them off all the time.
No, but some are attached with chains.
That too.
And when you want to dump that, he has a chain that is there only to bite him, and it's not very good. Go ahead.
Okay. Just a couple things on this. I'm actually not terribly settled on a lot of the stuff in this just yet. I wanted to bounce it off you first. This is potentially the most prescriptive we could possibly get in some of these details, and I'm not 100% comfortable with a couple of things just yet, and that's what I wanted to go through. I think maybe the better intention of this, and tell me what you think, Councillor, is if it has a lid, it must be.
I like that.
I don't know that it's the intention to require it.
Okay,
But
good.
if it has one, it needs to follow some certain.
This way of reading, it
parameters.
looks like it required a lid, but
Yeah, I totally hear you. But where I'm also not particularly comfortable, at least settled myself, is we took this from another community's bylaw, but I'm not sure if I'm totally settled on the minimum requirements on some of these things. So the minimum size of the container, the minimum size of the garbage bag.
Yeah.
I understand that Darcy doesn't want to pick up, a bunch of Ziplocs full of garbage at the curb. I get that. I don't see that happening, by the way, but that may be a little overreach for the purposes of what we need. So I would welcome that type of feedback as well.
Right. I mean, everything is defined in liters or in kilogram capacity. Honestly, to me, it's a medium-sized bag or a large-sized bag or an extra large. And that satisfies me a lot
The
more.
one thing I
Mary.
noticed in here that I thought was was H, without wheels. I mean, there's a lot, it's so much easier for seniors to pull their garbage that has a garbage can that has wheels on the bottom. It doesn't add any weight to it. I mean, I have them, and I've had them for years. And I've talked to Darcy, he's never had an issue with my garbage cans, but then I don't overload them either, too. But anyways, it's just easier to transport it out to the side of the road if it has wheels rather than carrying it. I mean, I can pack my cane and pull my garbage can at the same time.
No, I totally hear you. And there are many cans that are like that
Simple.
in town. Yeah. Councillor Selk.
the simple solution is at the beginning of the paragraph, it says, any owner who chooses to place refuse in a receptacle, and then it gives the definitions. You
Yeah.
don't have to put it in a receptacle. I know what you're gonna say about the birds and all that stuff, but I don't throw my crap in a receptacle. I put it in a bag on the curb, and he comes by and gets it.
Yes, that's what I do too.
And I've had to scatter it over my yard by birds, so that's why I don't leave it out in just a bag.
You got a pellet gun, take care of that.
I do, but I don't get.
The neighbors
get the
across
rest
the
of the
street get
council on
nervous.
that?
Yeah.
I just
But-
don't put it out at nighttime.
Yeah, but it just say who chooses to.
Yeah.
So it means you have a choice.
Exactly.
You can do it one way or you can do it the other way.
Other way with the bag, yeah.
Mayor, if I might, as a follow-up, I think what we're trying to get away from here is the
Over prescriptive
Yeah, the-
nature of things.
extra dwelling that they put on the front of their lawn that they throw their garbage in. It is. If we're gonna have this monster-sized receptacle that can't even get access to, then I think that's why we're trying to define it. But anyway, let's not get too
It's,
overly prescriptive on this.
I really find it very prescriptive.
And that's fine.
Honestly.
I assume that would be a lot of the sentiment here, and that's why I just wanted to have a bit of a brief discussion over some of the points, and then we can go back and retool this. I wasn't even looking for first reading tonight. There's no panic on it
Yeah.
at all. We've given it to Darcy to give us comment as well, so we've had some verbal conversation, but he's going to go through it, fine-tooth comb it, and give us any additional. So by all means, it's welcome feedback. We were taking from other communities to try and satisfy, but recognizing it is prescriptive. No debate.
Oh.
No debate.
I found it a little bit painful reading it truly.
Now we're at pain.
One of the things number 6, garbage receptacles, those homemade things, they're big and they're awkward, and some of them are very difficult for Darcy to get into. My thought is, just don't allow them. If a person can haul his garbage bag from his house to put it in there, why can't he bring it out the day that he needs to from his house? He can put that receptacle by his house, bring him out himself or herself, and take him to the curb. I don't think that's a big issue. But to have that thing there, most of those are dilapidated that I see in town. They're not in good shape at all. They look horrible, and they don't look nice in town. And and I can understand Darcy's situation there.
Councillor Selk, Councillor Bengry.
For number 6, I think there's a simple solution. If you're gonna make it like an extra dwelling, then we'll just tax it.
We have a refuse rate under the mill rate bylaw, a refuse container rate.
It's your assessment because you have an additional dwelling on your property.
Okay. I appreciate your sense of humor, Councillor Selk. It always brings a smile to our face.
He's joking.
I'm not convinced that's a joke either, but
I don't think so either.
we'll look at the prescription of all those clauses. I wanted to get some feedback also on this notion of any time we go on private property that we're getting a release from the owner of the private property of liability. Are we still on the same page with that? Is that still something to implement?
Councillor Bengry, Councillor Drew, you had mentioned that.
Yeah.
Councillor Bengry?
When we started this exercise and reviewing this, it was my idea and thinking that we were looking at, if you're using a container, that we would regulate the size of that container if you wish to use a container. And if you wish to use the garbage bags, you continue to use garbage bags, but a minimum amount of, or a maximum amount of garbage bags. So, we can write all we want,
Yeah.
and I think it's the controlling of the weight and the Darcy can handle the weight and everything like that, but I'll tell you, we all get old.
Yeah, but Darcy also did not want to see 20 shopping bags
That's
at
right,
a curb.
and that's what I said.
That's
We were
not
mentioned
what you wanted to
40-pound
see.
bag, right? 40 pounds.
we were going to limit the amount of bags, and we were going to also limit the container if you wished to take that option to use a container.
Yeah, well, Councillor Drew.
So, just with the waiver, we've had a conversation about the waiver that the landowner would sign saying that if something was broken, run over, whatever.
Yeah.
I guess my concern is how well would that hold up in court if something was damaged and they decided to take the town and/or the contractor?
Okay, so
Right.
that's an interesting point, because if I understand right, and Jeff, correct me there, the contractor needs to have a fairly hefty insurance doing his job.
So all of our contractors have to have a $2 million commercial liability policy with the town as an additional named insured. Now, that is intended to protect the town from liabilities or damages caused by the contractor. So, for example, the contractor gets sued and the town is third-partied in.
Right. Yeah.
Right, because he's our contractor. Well, his insurance now is going to be the one
Cover you guys.
taking care of us, because we're named insured under his commercial policy. So that's why it's in place, is for our protection and his as well. Don't get me wrong; he has to have significant insurance as well. So I guess to your point, Councillor, we would do we will get that vetted, at least to get an opinion on if it would be not worth the paper that it's drafted on, or if it holds some weight. We know that our liability waivers for recreation are vetted. They're not perfect, but they're good, and they give us some level of protection. I would assume this one would be similar. I think this is something that we could enforce quite fairly okay, because you have the consent of the landowner on the document as well, and they understood what they were agreeing to. I think those things can be quite clear.
So there is,
Sorry,
carry on, Councillor.
That thought, why are we having a contractor going into somebody's
That's right.
yard, garage, or whatever, and picking up
Driveways are-
when they have, Darcy doesn't come to my house and I open up my garage door and he comes in and gets my garage, all my garbage from my garage. And so part of me feels that it doesn't matter where you live, you get your garbage to the curb and that's where it's picked up. And maybe I'm being narrow-minded there, but I just feel like it opens us and our contractor up to situations where if something went wrong or something was damaged, we go to court, right? So
He mentioned, to back up what he's saying for concern, he mentioned that in the winter is definitely more of an issue and that sometimes he gets stuck on a pathway. That's not good. It slows down his pickup time, no doubt. But that's a service that he has chosen to render under his contract. Councillor Barnes, Councillor Bengry.
This one is really only for people who have huge properties, like out on the home seekers, right? That
not
part, is it not?
There's a number on 10th Street.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is a larger property where they have to drive onto the driveway
For sure,
to pick it up. And I get what Councillor Drew's saying, because I've had the same thought too. But especially in the wintertime, like Darcy's already said, he's not going onto that property if it's not plowed. You've got to have that roadway plowed if he's going to drive on it. So
Well,
he doesn't
he
have that kind of an
mentioned-
issue.
He
He's just
mentioned
gonna leave it
the
otherwise.
problem. He did.
You know, so anyways, but I'm honestly, I lean towards the thought, get your garbage to the curb or to the roadside. That's my feeling, but maybe I'm male.
Councillor Bengry, Councillor Brown. Okay, Councillor Brown.
So, have we given you enough direction?
I know that two of you are just in favor of telling him to get it to the roadside, but I'm not sure where the rest of you sit there. And it could be a little of both. We may find some property owners that say, I'm not signing a waiver. You come on here and wreck something, well, then we're not going on your property anymore. That made it real simple.
Period. Yeah.
Curbside pickup.
Okay.
You can get it to the road.
Yeah.
Jeff,
Exactly.
Jeff, is it possible to find out from Darcy how many of those properties are really involved
Yeah.
during his pickup of garbage, where he has to go on the property itself? Maybe we need a little bit of those informations also.
What does that number do for you?
Well, to find out if this is a big problem, a small problem, if to him it's not a problem, why should we make it a problem? That's what I'm
Well,
wondering.
it's a concern for him. You look at properties on Home Seekers, 10th West, 12th West, even Ryan Jensen's on 9th West. There's a couple of more I'm just forgetting. So all of those, pretty much, he goes on to...
Did Ryan's?
Yeah, he goes right in behind Ryan's whole house there.
Oh, my goodness.
And so, yeah, there's...
Far to pull his garbage.
Yeah, it is.
Well, if
He's a
it's-
ways
Quite a
back.
ways.
I mean, you look at properties like the former Quinton home on Home Seekers,
Yeah.
Dale and Sharon's. It's
Dale.
Morton's now, Dale and
Yeah.
Sharon. I mean, that's a quarter mile of the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a long
Right.
way up there.
So maybe then the question is for me, would Darcy prefer to see in this bylaw pick up at a curb only?
Yeah.
I think my opinion is Darcy wants to
Please,
make sure
everybody.
the
but-
client is satisfied, but he doesn't want to expose himself to unnecessary liabilities.
Yeah.
So
Well,
the,
then-
I think that the waiver may satisfy him in that to some degree.
Yeah.
Corey, you take care of the school buses. You have to go into properties, right? What kind of a liability situation have you got there? If school bus runs over some kid's bike or motorcycle or something like that?
Waiver. Do you
Yeah.
have any?
Policy where they're required to sign a waiver.
Yeah, no, it's kind of.
All right, so it's a waiver.
Waiver
And
would work.
then Jeff, maybe what needs to be added there is, I'm trying to understand, how do we deal with the pickup on those type of properties in the winter when he's not going to pick it up because the road is not plowed or so frozen, he's going to skid all over. It's not there. Is it his own choice? And then the people call and say, my garbage was not picked up? So how do we protect him from that? I don't know.
If I may, a lot of those
Councillor
people
Baum.
that are living out there are former ranchers and farmers. They're used to hauling their garbage to the dump themselves.
Just burn it.
So I can't see that it's a big issue. I think the waiver is probably the way to go if we're not going to make them come to the curb.
Okay, all right. So Jeff, you can
I don't think we
figure
need
out
to
a
make
few.
complicated.
Formalize that waiver. I'll have it vetted, just to make sure it's got some
Yeah.
teeth.
Appreciate that.
Okay. And that if we have Darcy not pick up the garbage a day where the road is not plowed, it's no sense for the owner to call the town.
Okay, we'll retool that and bring it back to you in August.
All right. Thank you. Now, 6C, accessibility policy. So I understand that this was something that is new and trying to create a more friendly environment in town.
So you had a presentation, it's been over a year ago, from a
Yeah.
group that was petitioning for these types of policies at municipal level. When we looked at their templates, there was some things we didn't put in this. We were concerned it was a little bit prescriptive. So what we tried to make it is generally, I mean, I think there's a couple things happening here. When we look at new facilities, major renovations, accessibility is encoded in the building code.
Yeah.
So it's not as though you can escape it under anything that requires a permit, which is great and fine. And then we have other initiatives such as when we do so many ramped corners a year. Every time we do a new street or curb and gutter, we put ramps on the corners and do that. So we're trying to implement that in. What this group was looking for was a policy of council that simply gave some guidance to our programming and to our construction to ensure that those accessibility principles were considered.
Yeah.
I mean, they would have it maybe a little more prescribed that mandated would be their preference. So we tried to make it so we were saying that, look, we're always going to try and consider principles of accessibility in the work we do. And where budget it allows and where we can do it financially, that's what we'll incorporate. We were trying to just take a half a step back from saying it had to be, the maximum accessibility one could imagine, because that could get cost prohibitive in a hurry.
Councillor Barnes?
So, just so I understand, this is for municipal properties, right? This isn't going to mandate people from downtown and the businesses and stuff?
Yeah.
This is just for the municipal buildings?
Yeah, the intent wasn't to transfer, it's a policy, it's not a bylaw. If you wanted to put that upon the residents and businesses, you'd need to do that by bylaw.
Yeah.
So this is internally focused?
Yeah,
It's
because one of the things I thought about when I was looking at this, I was thinking that our stairway here, the terrible situation. I like what they've got at the Carriage House Theater. They've got that nice little elevator that gives, in my opinion, a lot safer accessibility to the theater. And I don't know, maybe that's something we need to look at so that people can come up here. Because a lot of the seniors don't want to come up here. It's hard.
Don't we have
for
a
them.
$40,000 lift right there?
Yeah,
Yeah, the thing that's always breaking down.
It has had some troubles. I agree with you there, yeah.
Councillor
But
Barnes,
anyways, that could be one thing we can look
Councillor
at.
Barnes, I rode on that chair
I know
a
you did.
couple of times. It's just as safe and sound as anything.
Until it breaks down on you.
Oh, Councillor, everything will break down sooner or later.
That's been a particular lemon.
That
I
one
won't
has
debate
been a
that.
lemon.
I'm
Absolutely.
frustrated
All
to
right.
no end with that.
That's the one I'm
next
thinking about
time,
more than
make us
anything.
a favor and try it
Yeah?
and prove yourself right or wrong.
I don't need
Bring a
to
book
prove it,
with
I
you.
know it already.
But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
It is true that
I
it
saw
has
Councillor
not
Bengry
been,
go up there a couple of times, I was scared for his life.
it is not always been the perfect tool around here.
Anyways, I can still hobble.
All right, so are you comfortable with that policy? Personally, I think it fits a bill.
Yep.
All right, so Jeff, carry on with that bill, that
I need a
policy.
resolution to adopt
Yeah,
the policy.
we're going to do that for you.
Resolution.
Councillor,
Resolution to adopt policy A50, accessibility policy.
all right, further questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you very much. All right, now comes next the most interesting bill. All right, so
On the council chamber.
we are going to talk about Bill 2 prohibition. Some citizen in town read the article in the paper and said, oh, how interesting. So anyways, I have done a little bit of reflection, and I like to talk a little bit about that to give you a little bit of the context that happened with this bill and the following resolution that happened. So when I have concern, of course, it appears from the responses to a Q&A session in Tabor, which you have attached to the letter, that those were questions that had been presented by the town in early March. And the bill may be intended to give municipalities in southern Alberta who are presently in a prohibition a possibility/opportunity to approve application at the local level as a requirement prior to AGCL, the Alberta Gaming and Cannabis and Liquor Commission, granting a license. So if council denies the application, further applications under all classes cannot be entertained until 3 years later from the date of the refusal. So that is fairly clear. So when we got wind of the amendments to Bill 2 under the red tape reduction initiative, we went to Tabor and met MLA and Minister of Red Tape Reduction, Mr. Grant Hunter, in March of 2020. Jeff had prepared a series of questions that you have in your packet to obtain clarification as to the intent of the amendments to Bill 2. For some strange reason, Raymond received the answers to our question in April. Jeff finally obtained the letter with answers to our question this past week. Strange. So if you interpret the answers as given, it seems to say that municipalities that are now in a prohibition area in southern Alberta now have the authority to draft bylaws to accept application for alcohol licenses and restrict the types of licenses in their communities prior to the AGCL granting the license. So this is a total departure from previous AGCL position, where if one application was approved by binding plebiscite, all subsequent applications, no matter which type or class, had to be approved. So the changes made in the amendment cannot be fully understood until the regulations that support this bill give us more detail regarding the application of the bill. So what is presently unsettling for us is the ambiguity in the responses given to the following questions. The question was, does a municipality have the authority to discriminate approval based upon the type of license being applied for? The answer, as you can see in your packet, is yes, with the following. The AGCL board will not issue a liquor license that is not in accordance with municipal laws. In other words, you need laws. If the municipality creates a bylaw allowing certain types of licenses and not others, this decision will be respected by the AGCL board. So municipalities seem to be the restricting authority. However, when asked the following question, is the ability to approve or disapprove a liquor license ultra-virus to the local community, thus exposing the municipality to litigation and other punitive risks? The answer seems that AGLC, or CL, will back the decision of the municipality. But if the decision of the municipality is challenged, it becomes a problem of the municipality. The answer was, it is recommended that the municipalities seek their own legal opinion. However, Alberta Justice and Solicitor General did not flag this amendment as a legal risk. So how can the answer be, on one hand, yes by the AGCL upon acceptance by a municipality of an application, and on the other hand, if the municipality is challenged in its decision, it becomes its problem? There is a problem. It doesn't fit. So a municipality can approve or not approve a liquor license application at any time. That we understand. The amendment seems to suggest that municipalities in a prohibition zone can draft a bylaw stating their intent regarding application and intended restrictions. So if we create a bylaw in response to Bill 2 amendments, the first thing is, will this council feel inclined to have a bylaw drafted to approve a restricted application of alcohol licenses, meaning allowing for approval of certain class of liquor licenses? That's the first question we need to ask ourselves. Or will we designate some area through our land use bylaw where such business could open shop as we did with cannabis? That's another possibility. Secondly, what is still unclear is if within a class, certain application can be rejected, or if all application under that class must be accepted, or can the municipality within a class be selective? We're not sure. 3, cannabis required a land use bylaw amendment to protect the youth from easy access to the product. If council were to proceed in the affirmative, protective measures need to be in place as for cannabis. What could that be? 5th, will there be public input in the matter? 7 years ago, the plebiscite results, and by a large majority, did not favor alcohol at all in town. 5th, 7 years ago, residents of the Blood Tribe were extremely concerned and were hoping that the town would remain dry. They find themselves also challenged by this very bill at this point. We may want to keep in contact with them regarding this matter. And 6, what about legalizing alcohol use in parks if a municipality chooses to remain dry? The bylaw allows for drinking parks, in certain parks. So those are points that I kind of put forward just to help us kind of share our thoughts regarding the matter. But as you can see, it's still for us as clear as mud. Councillor Barnes?
The first thought I had when I read this was to have the restricted areas like we do with the cannabis. So there's very few areas in town that they could be granted that license, or they could sell it, or use it openly. And we got legal advice on that, and if that's what we have to do, we have to do, but I can't.
You don't have to do.
No,
Councillor.
I don't, you don't. Well,
Councillor has a choice.
All I know is, you know, we contacted Joseph Scow, he's our representative, and he wrote back to us, he said, CBC report's inaccurate. Bill 2 transfers license granting authority from the province to the municipalities. And this assures that the future provincial governments can't just grant a license. If the town wants a liquor license, it's now their decision, not ours. So I thought if we can say no, we can say no.
But this is a whole issue.
And that's why we need to find out the ambiguity, because there is some.
Yes, there is some. Jeff?
A couple of things on this. I'll still maintain I've been disappointed in both of the MLAs that have been taking care of this and not consulting the municipalities that are affected. I think that was in poor taste. I think they could have done better there.
Absolutely.
The second thing is we have this statement from the policy at the AGLC, which I'm struggling to understand. There's a couple of big issues here, but I will tell you tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, all of the CAOs and the ministry and the MLA are having a meeting, because we've been getting back to Joseph saying, how does this apply? And the information we're getting is inconsistent with our previous understanding. So if you look at items in Bill 2, such as the first section in 56, it says, subject to subsection 6 to 8, if the board receives an application for a liquor license for proposed licensed premises in a municipality, Métis settlement, or Indian Reserve in which there are no licensed premises, the board must refer the application to the municipality. That is also, I should say, the previous AGLC for municipalities without license, but it was always interpreted to mean you only had discretion on the first one. That's what it was always interpreted to mean, because once you've allowed a license in your community, you're no longer a community without license.
That's right.
And you don't get, as a council, any discretion over further licenses. But AGLC in their letter is saying, oh yeah, whatever bylaw you write will be good with in perpetuity. But I will go out on a limb here and suggest there are no other municipalities in this province of Alberta that have bylaws restricting the types of license in their community. And when we looked at prohibition years ago, leading up into the plebiscite, we asked the question of the AGLC lawyers, specifically, if prohibition goes away, can the local council regulate the types of license by bylaw? And the answer was no, you cannot.
That's right.
And so we're getting very different answers on this, and no one's really sure how to proceed. I hosted a meeting with all the CAOs affected last week, and that's where I found out that we had this letter and that some of those responses had come back. And you do have councils, at least according to their CAOs, that are simply going to take the letter of the law and say no, and then no one else can apply for 3 years. And then in 3 years, they're going to say no then too. So they're not going to go down this path of trying to decide if they're going to make bylaws or land use bylaw restrictions, are just saying no, and then no one else can apply for 3 years. And that's certainly, according to the letter of the law, strategy. There's no debate. So there's a lot to consider here, and it's a little ambiguous, so I hope to know a little bit more after tomorrow night as well. But I just found out about that meeting a couple hours ago.
Councillor Cole?
The town of Raymond has allowed the Eagles Hall to be built right behind their town administrative building. They've given them a liquor license in that building. How have they done that?
So they have a private member's annual license. It's the same as the dart club at the golf course in McGrath. That's exactly what it is. They have a private member's annual license that if you are a member of the club, you can buy liquor on designated nights or events or times as part of the club activities. It just so happens the dart club miraculously functions from 7 in the morning until 9 p.m. all summer long.
I saw the Legion has done it. You have to be a member of the Legion.
No,
to buy
Legions
alcohol.
have their own
different
special
one.
exemptions as well. They operate
You have to be a
under...
member of the Legion to buy alcohol out there then.
No, you do not.
Councillor Selk?
Okay. For years, we have been trying to work around selling alcohol at the golf course. And we've used the McGrath model, and AGLC has always said, don't go down that road, because we're going to end up taking that away from them.
Yeah.
Well, now it's left up to the municipalities to decide. So it's a bit disingenuous on our part if we want to sell liquor at the golf course and then tell every other business in town, except you can't.
And
you have a challenge. I mean, to be honest, if we go back years ago when we were looking at this, the request of this was almost 3 councils ago because Rick was mayor at the time. The intent was if the council could request prohibition removed and control the types of licenses by bylaw, that was actually something they wanted to explore then. Some of you might have been there. Yeah, you were there. Yeah. But the answer was no, you can't. But now we're being told that maybe you can. You might be able to say that the town is in favor of issuing Class B licenses, which I believe is golf courses and sport, agrodome and that kind of thing, and that's it. Maybe or Class A licenses there's a Class A with minors, which would be a licensed restaurant that allows minors, for example. So they're saying that the council may have discretion to say we would allow in our community Class A with minor licenses and Class B licenses. But we're not going to allow C through F now, I believe it is. Very interesting. It's interesting, but I'm not convinced it's accurate yet. I'm still not quite there. Because I don't understand, particularly, let's take cannabis as an example. When cannabis was legalized and alcohol is legal, we were told specifically, across the board, you cannot prohibit by bylaw the sale of cannabis in your community. You can only put in land use restrictions to limit where it can be sold. But you're going to get sued and lose if you just try and eliminate it for some kind of moral reason. But you can do it for planning reasons. So what did we do? We amended the land use bylaw to only allow certain areas and setbacks from sensitive areas. And the very same act is now saying, yeah, go ahead and write a bylaw and prohibit it for whatever reasons you want. We won't even ask. You just tell us you don't want it, and we'll go with it.
Councillor Selk?
All right. The mayor's already made a reference to this. So any establishment that decides they want a liquor license, and we say, yeah, no. And then they decide, well, you know what, we're making a constitutional challenge on this. We're going to go to court. And then the court decides, no, you can't do that. That's unconstitutional. The decision is made for us. Why do we keep beating ourselves up on this when then the legal requirements fall on us and the legal costs fall on us?
What is the whole problem?
So I have a difficult time thinking that we should keep litigating something, and maybe we should just come up with a way to make this work.
Yep.
Well,
And I wish I had better answers for you on every point, and I'm hoping that's coming. I think already, particularly Joseph has seen that the implementation of the bill is much more difficult than the passing of the bill. And so, which is normally the case, and there's regulation that'll come, and there's some things that'll happen. So, again, I got an email probably at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock that we're meeting tomorrow night with the ministry to try and work through some of this. So we'll know more then.
All right, so Jeff, try to gather more information, and they need to clarify the full intent and how it would be applied before we can make a reasonable decision here.
And I don't want to be a super downer, but sometimes the only way you find out how the law is applied is when you get sued.
I know, but
I hate to
honestly,
say it, somebody will have to be the first, right? Because there's policymakers and then there's litigators, and they're not the same people.
you are right, but I mean, are we a town that can stand such a challenge?
Well, it's one of any 7 of us, potentially, depending on how everyone proceeds with it, right? But hopefully, when I did the agenda, I had no idea we were going to have any meetings. It seemed like we'd had our answers, and that was that. But thankfully, the media's really got a hold of this. And I get 1 or 2 a day media requests, and usually just tell them we're not sure what to make of it yet. So we have to just give us some time.
I mean, they call me, I refer them to Jeff.
Yeah, thanks.
Very kind.
So we're just kind of working through that, and then our MLAs are seeing the media releases where I'm saying things like, we found out about it the same time as anybody else, and we weren't really asked our opinion along the way. So it might be what we want, but we don't know. It could be good. I just don't know for sure.
Yeah, we need the details, unfortunately, on this one.
Transparency for you.
Right. Okay, so thank you so much. So we will let that rest at this point, if you don't mind. We need a little bit more information, and there are some important decisions to be made, as Councillor Selk alluded to, and sooner or later, decisions need to be made.
Mayor,
Yes.
can we have a break?
If you so wish.
He's got some pizza real quick. We figured it'd be a little bit long tonight, so he's just bringing it upstairs right now.
Okay, so maybe
We'll
right now
take a
is a good time.
15-minute break.
Sure. Would you, that's your motion? Mm-hmm. All in favor? Sure. Thank you very much. Okay, so we shall recess for 15 minutes?
Yeah, I pushed some mail until 7:30.
Okay, good idea. Thank you. I mean, I may have sounded a little harsh, but honestly, when we went to Tabor, we were
about ready to bring it up right now.
That's all what you wanted all the time.
I didn't want to say that. I'll be the few to say that.
Yes, I know.